All right, my friends, I'm back. And now we're going to deal with the cons. We're going to talk all about the why you should not live in a van. Now, if you saw my last video, it's all the pros of why you should. In fact, why should you even consider any cons when you see the pros? They're so beautiful, they're so inspiring, and you just want to go. You know, it's one of those things that I don't want to see the cons. I just love the pros. The thing about it is you have to love the pros enough to overcome the cons. I'll say this. Had I taken a more reliable vehicle, it would be a little bit less cons than what I have in my videos. But nevertheless, even with good, dependable vehicle, you're still going to have your flat tires. A pebble can hit your radiator and your radiator can leak, or you can leave your lights on, your dome lights on a long time and kill your battery. You know, all those things can happen to any vehicle. So you got to watch those things. Nevertheless, the cons can drown out the pros, depending on your situation and how you feel about the pros and the cons. Let's go ahead and go down a list of all the cons. I'm going to have to start with something like I started with the other one. It's adventure, right? It's an adventure, a mystery. When you are in the wilderness, everything's an adventure and a mystery because you don't know what's out there. You don't know what you're going to run into. And you hope that there's other people around because it's so lonely at times. There's no one around. And you hear sounds and well, that's part of the adventure, but as a con, if you have those kind of fears, you shouldn't go alone on a trip like this. At home, you can go shopping when you need something, and you can shop large and pack everything in your refrigerator. You have everything at home for weeks. In this case, you're limited on space. So you must go shopping a little bit more often. So if I go shopping for 3 or 4 days on vegetables, fruits, nuts, some meats to barbecue, some coals and lighting, then you have to be close to cities, at least close enough to go over there, get some stuff and come back. But you got to leave your tent all set up. If you're there for 2 weeks, you got to drive and leave everything alone while you go and get your supplies, because you can't buy for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. There's not enough space in a van. So yeah, you could last weeks with canned food, but if it's fresh and you got to put it in a refrigerator or some kind of cooler, there's not enough space. So you must go shopping more often. That's the inconvenience of having to shop every 2 or 3 days versus at home where you can pack for weeks. So unless you're in an RV with a refrigerator in it, you're not living in a van. That's different. That's a horse of a different color, because it doesn't even compare. Another con that could be an issue, an old car. In my case, I took a vehicle that is 2001, and that's quite old for trips like this. But I had checked with my mechanic, everything was fine. Everything looks good. My radiator is good, my tires are good. I mean, everything looked good. Unfortunately, new or old, you can still get a flat tire. In fact, my flat tire that I got on my trip was a brand new tire. In the case of my radiator, when it steamed up and all that, it had a small leak. So what caused a small leak? I don't know. If it's just old age of the radiator, or maybe a little pebble down the road, it hit my radiator and caused a small leak. Lucky for me, it was a small leak and I could use a sealant and seal it. If you have other problems, for example, I also had a problem where I left my lights on and my dome lights on in the vehicle. While I was setting up tent, while I was taking things in and out of the van and all that, I left my dome lights on. Well, 2 days of that killed my battery. And that could happen to a new car just as well as an old car, because it was a brand new battery. So I knew I didn't have to worry about my battery. I did have to worry about my alternator, because my vehicle had changed 4 alternators already. So my biggest fear was that if I get stuck somewhere out of power, it's because of my alternator. In my case, I was lucky, and it was just my dome lights I left on, and I was able to fix the problem because just by chance, I took one of those little chargers that you plug into the wall. Well, plug it into my solar generator and give it enough power to start the vehicle. And that's the story you've got to see in my videos, because it's pretty funny. Well, not so funny at the time, but so that's the problem that I had to deal with at that time. I had problems with my brakes, and I had to buy new tires, etc., etc. My brakes on my vehicle, because it just has that problem, it's an older car. Sometimes my pedal gets a little bit stuck on the brake part. So when I'm driving down the road, I started to shake like it wants to die, and I pull off on the side of the road, and I checked the motor, the water in the radiator, everything is fine. Why is it doing this? I didn't know, so I took off again, and it did it again. It started shaking, and it wanted to pull off, almost like dying. So I pulled off to the side of the road again, and I said, what in the world could it be? It dawned on me that my brake was still on just a little bit. It got stuck on the brake position, just slightly, enough to want to put brakes on me while I'm driving on the highway. So I figured it out, and sure enough, I pulled my pedal back towards me and it drove again. But that's an older vehicle. Some new vehicle will never have that problem. The best thing to do is take a reliable vehicle. One that is new enough to where you don't have to worry about all these old vehicle problems. One of the things I touched earlier was about going shopping. You leave your tent set up. Well, you have to worry about theft. You do that in the home too, in the city. In fact, there's more robberies and all that in the city than it is out there in the wilderness. But you're more secure being in your home, locked doors, alarm, etc. You have a dog in your backyard, and so you have more security in that sense. But when you leave your camp to go shopping for a few days of groceries, something, ice, maybe you need some ice, you got to leave your tent set up. First of all, you have to worry about the theft. Someone comes by and steals your stuff while you're gone. Another one could be maybe a bear starts coming around sniffing and see what and tears up your whole tent. Or some wolves, coyotes, raccoons, possums, anything that can get in there and start looking around what you have on your tent. You're not there to scare them off or secure your tent. You're not there. So that's when going with more than one person is convenient, because one person can stay in the tent while the other one goes shopping. And you can't leave your dog tied up on the tent to guard your place, because if it's a bear or wolves or something, your dog can be killed. Even coyotes, a pack of coyotes come and kill your dog. So, but it doesn't happen very often. It's probably one of those very slim chances that it would happen, but it could happen. Being attacked by other animals while you are camping out in the forest is possible. Very unlikely, but it's possible. And that's a fear that can be a turn off for traveling or living in a van. I mean, the whole day can be messed up just because a bear came by and you had to scare it off, fight it off if you can with the bear spray and your dog and in other words, it could be dramatic and very scary. So if you are that kind of person that does not want to confront any of that kind of adventure or mystery or that kind of fear, then this trip's not for you, especially if you're alone. Being alone is definitely a con when animals can come and attack or investigate your tent. I think that that is very, very possible, and it can happen pretty much all the time, is that you have bugs. You got mosquitoes, you got ticks, fleas, ants, fire ants, all kinds of bugs that some fly into your van, your tent. Could be wasps, could be bees. Not necessarily in the cooler temperatures, but in the summer, you're gonna have problems with bugs. I know that when I went to my bed to sleep, I had to wipe it down every evening, make sure nothing's on there, because you have some either ticks or some little bugs that just flew in there. You got some I don't know what they're called, just bugs. And you can't keep your windows open because they'll fly in. So I made some little nets from old window screens and cut out a piece so that I could actually put it on the edge of my glass on the top where the window opens, and kind of velcro it on there so that it would be the screen to keep the bugs out. So that was very important. It's a con because you have to deal with the bugs all the time. I got bitten all over the place with the little spider bites or ticks, and if you have a dog, it attracts the ticks even more. So to have a lot of mosquito repellent, something that is natural. I know there are some creams that are natural that can keep the bugs away from you, and sprays. I had to spray around my surroundings of the tent with a very strong bug killer, basically. But you can't do it if there's rivers around, because it's against the law. So you got to be careful where and how much you apply around the perimeter of your tent. That's for crawling bugs, not for flying bugs. But it's more of a con than it is a pro, because nobody really likes the bugs. So I couldn't be a pro, it has to be a con. Another thing you have to deal with, which I didn't mention earlier on eating when you go grocery shopping and all that, is that if you have to cook or warm up your water for coffee, is the whole of having to set up your coals, your fire, or unless you have one of those heaters that you just turn on and you light it up and the flame is there, and it only lasts you so long, and then you have to go buy another one, those little containers. But it does get your pots and pans dirtier than the kitchen does, because you got all that coal and the wood burning. It really gets your dishes all black. So that is a problem. But another problem that I see, a con on being out in the wilderness, is the heat and the cold. Or if you're living in a van, you're there 2 weeks, and the weather's going. If you can see that the weather's going to change really drastically, you need to pack and leave, go somewhere else, because it's going to blow your tent away. So you got problems in that respect that you don't have at home. So living in a van, weather-wise, can be a real pain in the neck. If it's very cold, to stay warm inside your tent without the danger of burning your tent down, there's problems. You got to really know what you're doing to keep your tent warm and your van, inside your van, warm without burning something. So, or without having too much carbon monoxide. So you gotta, it's a lot more to deal with when you're in the wilderness and you have to heat or cool. Now, if you're gonna cool your tent, I have an ice box, one of those styrofoam ice box, and you put the ice in it, and you put on one side is a hole, and the other side is a fan, and you plug it into your generator, solar generator, and it blows cold air. But that can only last as long as the ice is still ice. Once it melts, you don't have any more cold air. So it's good for the night, because you can stay cool through the night in a hot day, because it's not as hot as throughout the day. But if it's in the daytime, there's not much you can do about staying cool living in a van. Like I said, if you're in an RV, it's a different story. The wind blowing can blow your tent right away from where it's standing while it's raining and it's cold. So that's why it's very important that you always follow the weather. Very important. You can't just ignore it. You pay the consequences, believe me. The con of living in a van is that you have to go to the restroom and shower. And if you're not in a city area close by that you can go every day, go shower, go to the restroom, come back, which is more than likely it's not going to happen because you're in the wilderness, you're in a forest, you're not close to restrooms. Some forests do supply restrooms close by, which is not a full restroom, it's basically a hole in the ground inside a building. So it's very inconvenient that you have to go to a restroom, leave your tent, walk all the way to the restroom where they're provided by the forest. Or if you don't have that, you got to use a bucket. And a bucket is, sure, it's convenient because it's right there inside the tent. And you can take care of your business and then close the bag, seal it, and you're done with it. It's not very pleasant to have to do that versus an RV or living at home where you have your restrooms, all the facilities. Let's put it this way. My wife didn't go with me because of that. That was the main reason why my wife didn't travel with me. Because you have to use a bucket. And let's face it, it's not the commodities of a hotel. It becomes a pleasure to be in a restroom and showers, real showers. Now for my showers, you have to warm up the water. Then again, you have to turn on the coals, put the fire on, warm up some water, put in the bucket, fill up the bucket with some warm to hot water. Then use your shower head that connects to you got to set up the shower area, then shower. I mean, it's a lot of work to do that. So it's best to showering with a sponge, and then when you get to a city, do a full shower. But as far as going to the restroom, a bucket's the only option. Then you have the hard work of setting up and breaking down the tent every time you go to a new location. I made a mistake of going to too many locations in a short period of time versus setting up for 2 weeks, somewhere else 2 weeks, somewhere else 2 weeks, somewhere else 2 weeks. But then I only set up a few times and break down a few times versus what I did. I had to break down and set up quite a bit because I was going for maybe 1 day, 2 days. If I stay one night, I stay in the van, I sleep in the van. But if I'm there 2, 3 days, then I set up the tent more spacious, I can stand up and change clothes, etc. which is another inconvenience too. If you don't set up the tent to change clothes, it's very inconvenient to try to change clothes and all that while you have very small space inside the van. You got to consider both sides, the pros and the cons. And unfortunately, there's quite a bit of cons. It's a lot of work. You're thinking, well, I don't have the home chores at home, so I don't have to worry about chores. But in reality, when you are out there, you do have chores. Just to set up the tent and break it down is a chore. To have to warm up your water for the coffee and maybe make some breakfast, that's a chore. To wash the dishes afterwards, that's a chore. Clean your tent from all the dirt that you bring in with your feet when you go in and out. And let me tell you, it gets dusty as all get out. It is dusty. You're in the wilderness. Dust is one of your worst enemies because it's all over the place. But you got all day to do it. Almost 12-hour, 16-hour day. You got a lot of time to do it. So it's not like constantly cleaning up. Like I said, it's a lot of dirt, a lot of mud and stuff, and your hands get so dry and cracked. I had such a hard time with my hands cracked. I had to buy some those gloves that you use in the surgical gloves, just to keep my hands moist, because they were drying up fast. Another one would be the loneliness. If you go alone, all you have is your dog if you take a dog. And it gets pretty lonely. At times, especially if you're there 2 weeks in one location, and every time you go to different locations 2 weeks and no one's around but you, it gets lonely, and you gotta find things to do. And if you don't have things to do and new hobbies to pick up, and now you sometimes hope and pray there's some other people around that are camping that you can actually socialize with, because it gets, unless you're a person that doesn't care about being alone, that actually loves being alone, then you're okay with it. It's not a con at all. But a person that likes to socialize, likes to have other people around, and goes from that environment all the way to loneliness, being alone all the time, it's a big change, a big adjustment. And you not only start talking to yourself, but you're answering yourself. And you talk to the dog, and you hope the dog answers you, but it never does. But anyways, that leads me to the last con of living in a van. Since you are alone, and a dog cannot necessarily be your big helper in a situation of illness, or you break a leg, you're hiking and you broke an ankle, or you fall down and you ribs and shoulder, and you really hurt yourself, no one is around. That's the biggest fear. You have an illness, or you hurt yourself in an accident and you're by yourself. So if you travel and live in a van, I highly recommend you go with someone. Don't go by yourself. But if you do, you got to consider that. I don't know. It's just the fear of a stroke, for example. You can have a stroke, heart attack, and there's no one there to help you. No one. Your dog cannot take you to the hospital. Your dog cannot call 911. And the little button, if you take one with you, one of those that emergency calls, it may not even have connection. So that's the biggest fear, the biggest con of living in a van by yourself. And with that, I leave you thinking about the pros and cons, and I hope this has helped you to make a good decision on whether you want to go live in a van or travel long distance in a van with a dog or without a dog. Thanks for watching.